Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Do you believe that if you work harder you'll achieve bigger and better results? Well, if you do, I don't think you're alone, especially if you're part of the Western culture, if you like. Speaking from the UK, I know that the whole aspect of working and life all is about bigger and better, growing, and if you put the effort and mileage in, you'll achieve the results. And there's no doubt that it's important to work hard, but is it really the case that the more that you work, that you can achieve everything you want to? Now, in my education growing up, this was the kind of message that runs throughout things. I think I'd be influenced by my parents as well, who grew up in tougher times, in World War times, where working hard was the absolute norm, and you had to sort of work hard till you had no energy left in the day in order to show that you're pulling your weight, if you like. But actually, over sort of recent months, I've been reflecting on this and thinking, is there a different way? Does it automatically mean if I work my best that I'll achieve everything that I want to? If I work harder, will I grow and get bigger and better? Now, my answer would have been many years ago would have been yes. But subsequently for me, that's led to me having a bit of a chronic illness. One of the overwork and hard work was probably one of the things that have led me to having a chronic fatigue condition. So therefore it puts a question in my mind: is working hard the be all and end all in order to achieve? Or a better question is, does that lead to fruitfulness? So today I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into this area of working harder and look at 3 reasons why working harder does not necessarily or automatically lead to being fruitful. As a part of this, I will dig into Greg Keown's book Effortless that I reviewed recently, and I'll be drawing on some of my own experiences as we walk through. So let's get into things. The first reason we're going to look at is around the aspect of diminishing returns. Now, it's fine to be able to try as much as you can to do your best, but at the end of the day we are limited to the amount of energy and time that we have. And Pareto's principle, the sort of 80-20 principle, says that 20% of our efforts or time that we put in usually achieves 80% of the results. So therefore there is a point where that we reach that the more that we try harder, the achievement per hour decreases and goes down. So therefore, working harder and really putting all the effort in can be counterproductive. In Greg Keown's book Effortless, he says that this even can go on to achieve negative effects. So I just read from the book, where he says, negative returns, the point where we're not merely getting a small return on each additional investment, we're actually decreasing our overall output. For example, there is a point in writing where you start making a manuscript worse by working on it longer. The same can be said for composing a song, drafting a blueprint, preparing a legal argument, or writing computer code, along with many other endeavours. You are fatigued, your judgment is impaired. Every ounce of extra effort you put in is now detrimental. It's an example of a false economy to continue at this point. And so it's an excellent point, well made, and I've known that in my own life, where I've, if you like, over-functioned, and I keep just, being I suppose an Enneagram 1, a completer finisher. So Enneagram 1 is known as a bit of a perfectionist or likes to improve things. And alongside being a completer finisher at the same time, I want to get things done and finished to 100%. So the whole aspect of thinking, well, actually I'm just going to achieve 80% or not take it the whole way, is sometimes difficult to get onto. But I suppose over time I've learned, especially with my chronic illness and limited energy, that actually 80 to 90% is enough to take a step on in the right direction. So that's the first point, really, that diminishing returns come into play when you try and work harder, and it can even lead to more detrimental effects, and in fact you're going backwards. The second reason why working harder doesn't always lead to fruitfulness is around the aspect of control. Now, we tend to think we're in control of most things, and if we work harder and cover all the bases, then we've got total control. But the reality is we haven't. It's hard enough sometimes for us to be motivated to work well and do our best. But then there's other factors. There's people that you work with who won't necessarily share the same motivations and viewpoint that you do. So you might feel that they're not putting their weight on something, and you have to compensate. Or they might just have a bad day, and that has an impact on what you're trying to achieve. So there's that aspect, and then there's more the sort of global impact in terms of our environment will have an effect on how well we can achieve and be fruitful. From electricity cut that means the power's off and you can't work in that day, to storms, environmental factors meaning that things have to be cancelled. The recent global pandemic is a live example, really, of those things. So I think with a lot of things we have to hold them lightly, if you like. There is that aspect of just because we work hard doesn't mean we can control everything. And if we try and do that, it kind of leads back into diminishing returns. The more we try and hold on to something, then it's like that, you're holding on to sand. The more you try and hold it and squeeze it and control it, the more that the sand kind of falls through your hands and you haven't got control of it. So that's really, I suppose, point two in this, is that the fact that we haven't got total control over things means that the more if we work harder, doesn't always mean that we will be fruitful. The final reason why working harder doesn't always lead to fruitfulness is around the whole aspect of losing sight of the goal. I think when we work hard, we kind of put our head down and really just like head down, fall forward, let's go as fast as we can. But then we lose sight of what we're actually trying to achieve. If we focus on the goal being, I'm going to work as hard as I can, we lose sight of why we're actually doing it in the first place. So this happens quite a lot. I've known it with myself, where actually I've worked my real hardest in the day, and the result I've kind of produced or finished doesn't meet the brief that I was originally set. So therefore we've got to be really careful that we always keep our guiding star, our focal point clear on what we're trying to achieve and what fruitful looks like for all of us. So a sort of a bizarre example of this I can think of takes me back to a trip I took to Stockholm a few years ago, and the tale of I think it's called the Vasa ship, where the ship was created. The person in charge wanted certain things from the ship, and everyone was working hard to get it done and sorted and everything. But the person in charge kept changing the requirements, the specifications for things. But everyone else was just saying fair enough, they wanted to please the person, and they just put their heads down and tried to work as hard as they could to complete it. Now, what happened with in all that scenario is when the ship was launched, effectively just as it launched, a gust of wind hit and it sank. So what it did was, despite everyone trying as hard as they can to please everyone, to get the best product out, they'd lost sight of the actual goal of a ship, which is to sail and to float. And it's quite a famous story now, and like with many things, it's, out of failure comes lots of learning. So I love the story. It was a pleasure to go and meet some friends out there and have a look at the ship as it's been recreated and rebuilt in dry dock. But that's just an example of how sometimes we can take our eye off what really matters, the clear goal, when we're working hard. So there you have it, 3 reasons why working harder doesn't always lead to fruitfulness. Reason 1, diminishing returns. Reason 2, we don't have total control. 3, as we work harder and sometimes put our head down, we lose sight of the goal and what we're actually working hard for. So I suppose what comes out of that is, what can we do about it? Well, first thing really is to acknowledge where you are in it and think whether you are working harder or too hard or not, and whether you're achieving the results for it. And one of the things that came out of the Effortless book that I mentioned in a previous video is just maybe inverting the questions that you ask yourself. Rather than focusing on how hard can I work and putting everything in, asking yourself questions. How can I make this more simple for myself? How can I make this more effortless? Kind of turn it around and think, well, actually it's not about working as hard as I can and burning out. It's about achieving the results and being fruitful in what I'm called to be. So perhaps look at those things and just reflect and see where you get to. And finally, my one last thing is, I suppose, to help you again, answering the question, how do we know if we're working too hard? Well, I think simply we instinctively know whether we're over-functioning and overworking. The difficulties we don't always admit that we are. I kind of liken, the best example I can think of is when we're riding a bike. When you change your gears and you get the gear wrong, and sometimes you're pedaling furiously to move a distance and you're going absolutely nowhere. And it's just that feeling of putting loads of effort in and not seeing any breakthrough or steps forward. That's, I suppose, where you can see the diminishing returns is the more effort you're putting in that respect isn't going to push you forward. You need to change the approach, ask yourself a different question. So perhaps if you're feeling that you're like that cyclist who is just over pedaling at the moment, then you're probably working harder than you should do to achieve what it means to be fruitful and what you're called to do. So I hope that's helpful. Please subscribe and share this video, and in the meantime, be fruitful, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.